area of parent relationships and coach parent relationships has been one that's been an area of interest of mine, particularly over the last year as I started my PhD, looking at parental engagement within elite academy football, and specifically I'm looking at the key transitional periods of under 8s into under 9s, and from under 16s into under 18s, and looking at how the athletic triangle, which when we talk about the athletic triangle, we're referring to the parent, coach and athlete relationship, how they interact and collaborate over those key transitional periods, really. So my experiences have been within these 3 clubs predominantly, and I've had the pleasure of working with some not just brilliant coaches and players, but also some brilliant parents as well. And since the start of the EPPP in 2011, 2012, there's been a real kind of focus on how we can engage parents in a lot more different ways. And it's been really great to be a part of some of those kind of experiences. And some of the experiences I'll share later on in the presentation are things that I've helped put together and support, but also some other things that I've observed as well that have been really good. So as Camilla alluded to in her presentation, we know that the parent-coach relationship can be stressful for both parties. Coaches can cause stress amongst parents, as Camilla mentioned earlier on, and I've heard this phrase many a time from parents when talking to them, but it's also very apparent in the research that parents can feel that they're out of the communication loop and that the coaches don't tell them anything. But on the other hand, we know that parents can cause stress for coaches as well. In coaches' offices, you hear it predominantly, and Camilla probably has similar experiences of working within academy football, that sometimes you can get coaches who just say, that the parents don't have respect for the coach. And for me, that's gradually changing. And, at times there can still feel like there's a wall between the 2 parties, but hopefully some of the ideas I'll discuss over the next 10 minutes or so will look to help break those walls down. So that this relationship can play an increasingly positive role within a child's footballing and personal development. So when we look at the importance of communication in the coach-parent relationship, the reasons promoting communication within it are quite critical, because we know that the majority of parents know their children better than anybody else. And they can be a wonderful resource for coaches. So they'll know things, they'll know particular behaviours that their children are displaying. They'll be able to tell us about injuries they might have picked up or illnesses they might have. They can tell us key information around well-being. So we know I work with adolescents and children in late childhood, and we know they have mood fluctuations. They're at school, things happen at school that coaches might benefit from knowing about. From a physical perspective, kids might be going through growth spurts that might be interesting to know about in terms of how they're performing on a weekly basis in training and games. And most importantly, they can tell us about their general welfare. And such information can be gathered from positive communication within the coach-parent relationship. They can provide key information on a child that coaches and wider support staff, so those who work within academy systems where you're working with physio, sports scientists, etc., that we just might not be aware of, which is going to help you as a coach in your attempts to understand your players, build relationships and help develop them as both children and as players. And in addition, observing how parents and coaches interact. And if children are seeing a positive coach-parent relationship, it can be a great way for children to learn about positive communication, to learn about how to cooperate with others, to learn leadership skills. And we know players at a young age, those players that we're working with, model what they see, that they'll model parents, they'll model coaches. So actually, if we can demonstrate positive communication between parent and coach, that can be vital. And lastly, it creates an avenue and a space for parents to ask questions and communicate any concerns that they might have directly with a coach that otherwise, if left, could potentially get a lot worse. And most people might know what the English kind of academy system looks like, but there's an increased amount of time now that the players are now spending within academy environments. So players within the youth development phase, which is from the ages of 13 to 16 in England, are required to have upwards of 10 to 12 hours of training a week, plus strength conditioning sessions, plus psychology analysis sessions and support. So not only do the opportunities for coaches and parents to communicate increase, but so does the need for them to increase as well. And I'm just going to quickly describe a little bit of the research that I've carried out over the last year during the COVID-19 pandemic, because it's given us a great opportunity to explore these interactions in a bit more detail. It's kind of, in a sense, forced coaches and parents to actively engage with one another. And so it's led to coaches and parents becoming a bit more aware of how they treat one another. So over the lockdown period, we looked to explore the perceptions of players, coaches and parents regarding how they interacted during the COVID-19 pandemic to support players' well-being as well as their performance. We wanted to try and identify some of the learning opportunities that we could take and we could use following coming out of that COVID-19 pandemic, which we're unfortunately kind of still in. But when focusing specifically on the coach-parent relationship, there were some key findings. So as I mentioned earlier, and as Camilla alluded to in her presentation, actually key information regarding child's mood, well-being and general progress was shared amongst the coach and parent. Through their communication, the parent discussed one example, for example. Through their communication, one parent discussed a player's lack of motivation over that first lockdown period to the coach. The coach then engaged in dialogue with the player, discussed their general moods, what was going on for them at that moment in time. And that seemed to facilitate that player's level of engagement within the program that they were putting on. Now, without that interaction with the parent, the coach may otherwise not have known what was going on with that player, and potentially damaging assumptions about his lack of engagement might have then occurred. We also found that parents' understanding of their child's footballing program and their child's footballing goals increased. So one coach discussed how that increased interaction between parent and coach led to the parent having a greater understanding of their child's strengths, what their work-ons were, and that enabled them to play a more focused role in their son's development. And for coaches, this is a great benefit. It's really important for coaches as parents are then reinforcing the same messages as Camilla mentioned, as those are from the coach, and everyone's on that same page. And lastly, that increased interaction increased parents' appreciation of the coach's role. So actually, parents were actually a bit more understanding of the amount of time, the preparation that it took coaches actually to put sessions on, especially during that lockdown period, the first one when we were all getting used to the new ways of working. So there are opportunities for parents and coaches to get to know each other and learn about the demands of both individuals face, really, in terms of their roles. So that's just a little bit of an insight into some of the experiences of this relationship and the communication between the two that occurred during that lockdown period. So what does that look like in practice? So I kind of want to give you a few examples of what I've seen in terms of some really positive examples of what it looks like, on the field, I guess, is to say. And here are a few examples, that I've either been involved in, as I mentioned, or have witnessed that I believe have certainly increased the communication between parent and coach. So for me, firstly, is to provide regular feedback and updates to parents regarding their child's development. This was back about 2 or 3 years ago. I was working within a club, and as part of the EPPP, the Elite Player Performance Plan, within that plan, when under 9s to under 12s come in the foundation phase, it was stipulated that coaches had to meet with parents once every 12 weeks. So on average, once every 3 months. And talking to coaches, we had a little discussion, said, well, actually, that's quite a long period of time. And some of these parents would have been quite heavily involved within their child's development at grassroots level or under 8s. Some of them might have volunteered for the club that their son or daughter would be playing in. Some would have even been their coach. So to not allow them to be a kind of part of that process for the first 12 weeks of their journey within academy football seemed a little bit too long for us. So we decided to half that and do a review once every 6 weeks. But then also just to talk to the coaches and say, look, when we get the opportunity, can we just engage in little bits of informal conversations just to give them updates of how their child is progressing? And if they wanted a follow-up meeting, then they could organise that and put that in place. And it worked really well, and parents were really appreciative of the extra time that coaches spent to allow them to understand what was going on within the programme. More recently, parent rep groups have been set up, and it was something that I was involved in when I was at Sunderland, and something that I'm involved in currently at the club I'm at now. And this is a chance for parents and coaches to engage in formal and, I guess, informal conversations, and it gives parents an official space to not only raise concerns, because we don't want it just to be a moan kind of area, but also provide positive feedback on the programme that's currently in place. It also provides other disciplines within the academy the chance to discuss their side of the programme, and provide more clarity to unsure parents around what might be going on and what their children are doing within the academy space. So just yesterday evening, actually, we had a really good parent rep group where the head of coaching was in the session and was describing the programme that was coming up over the next few weeks or so. Camilla mentioned this kind of strategy, and for me, this is a really key one, and that's the induction at every age group and to all new parents. So when parents enter an academy, as I've mentioned, or even enter a new age group, they often don't know what to expect, and they don't know what's expected of them. So for me, parents would benefit from being provided information early on from coaches, which can help them support them through the transition that they're going through. So what might be included within those? Well, for me, it's all about setting out what expectations there are, and that's not just what coaches expect from parents, but also what parents expect from coaches. But for me, they'd come with things such as, when and when not parents can contact you. So a big thing that I've had previously when working in clubs is that parents might ring coaches at 8 p.m. on a Sunday evening, and the coaches are going, they shouldn't be doing that. Have you set those expectations out? Have those conversations happened about the do's and the don'ts, and when we can and can't, and when we shouldn't communicate with one another? Because actually that time for you is really important, but parents don't know it. So we need to set out those expectations. We need to set out boundaries, the objectives, the team and individual objectives that the coaches have and the parents have, so we're all on the same page. By doing this, you're providing parents with good information to talk to their sons and daughters about, rather than just hazarding a guess, because parents will do that. They'll hazard a guess at what's being worked upon and go against what you might be saying as a coach. And then lastly, this is a strategy that I won't take credit for, something that I've seen, but something that I'd love to try and put into place. But it's something that was at another Category 1 academy. But that was coaches presenting to parents around some of the sessions that they were putting on occasions. It was once every 5 to 6 weeks. So it was looking at why we're doing certain sessions, what your child's getting out of certain sessions. And it gave the parents that chance to feel a little bit more involved in their son's development. But it was another chance for parents not only to raise any concerns or issues they might have had, but again, it got everyone understanding of what was being worked on and making sure that everyone was on the same page. That is really critical in these children's development through the academy journey. So lastly, I just wanted to leave you with a few top tips. I think presentations like this are really important, that those who are coaches and are doing really good applied work is actually, what can I take from these sessions and go, actually, I'm going to try that. It's all contextual, it needs to fit your environment, but just some top tips to leave you with. So firstly, provide opportunities for parents and coaches to regularly engage with one another. The more parents and coaches communicate and the more they interact, the more information that's going to be subsequently shared. And that's going to mean there's going to be more consistent messages across that athletic triangle that I mentioned earlier. But you need to make sure that we're setting those boundaries and those expectations of when such conversations are going to take place, etc., and how they take place, and the do's and don'ts. Number two, it's important for coaches to, for me, communicate what's going on in the program and why. So information on current training schedules and competition goals that you've developed with their child is important. And by communicating those expectations and the objectives that they currently have, and by anticipating any potential problems that might occur, that's going to help parents keep on track and supporting the work that you're carrying out with their child. Thirdly, most parents want to be educated. They want to be educated and they want to develop their knowledge of the sport that their son's participating in. So providing them with resources that you've used will make sure that everyone's on the same page and not heading off in different directions. So actually a good example of that was some of the work we did at Sunderland. We introduced the parent support program. So once every month we had a member of staff from the academy that would come in and discuss. Parents were told who the member of staff would be. The member of staff would discuss what their program consisted of, why it's a benefit, why they do certain things. And it also gave parents the chance just to make sure they knew what was going on as well and ask any questions that they had. And lastly, this was when I first moved up to Sunderland, I was really impressed that at the end of every single game, win, lose or draw, sun, rain, even snow, it's the northeast, any weather's capable up there. Players would go to parents at the end of every game and thank them for their time and commitment to bringing their child to the session and to the game on a Sunday or Saturday. And then at times, not only were players doing that, but actually coaches would follow up afterwards. And you see coaches just gradually go up and thank the parents as well. And that would just start conversations between them. But it was a really poignant and a really powerful kind of simple act that the coaches did that I believe really improved those relationships and that communication between the two. So I think I've just hit 15 minutes bang on. So hopefully there are a few pieces there that you could think about potentially looking to incorporate into your practice. I'm very fortunate enough that I work within an academy system where there are resources available to put these kind of things in place. But I'm hoping one or two of these strategies, could also work within the context or the organisation or club that you work within. If there's any questions, obviously there's a few minutes for questions now, but if anyone wants to get in contact with me to delve deeper into any of the work that I've done at any of the clubs, for example, then please feel free to get in contact with me on any of those three means.